Safety 365.
Welcome to Safety 365, where our goal is to help you navigate more safely through your daily activities and understand the importance of taking proactive measures to safeguard yourself. I'm your host, Bill Barna. I'm a retired 33-year police officer, professional security consultant, and a former police academy instructor here to help you out along the way today. We'll be addressing the topic of public safety and guns and how recent changes can affect our daily life safety. I'm happy to be joined by today's guest, Enzo Cantalamessa, who has extensive knowledge of legalities and realities of societal violence. Enzo, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Bill. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Enzo is the City of Warren's law director and formerly the director of public safety, so you know a little bit about what's going on in society. And
I do indeed. I've had 8 years as Director of Public Safety and Service for the City of Warren. In that capacity, I was the administrative head of the Warren Police Department, so I've had pretty extensive experience on that front from the most minor offenses that are committed to some of the most serious, a lot of gun crimes, lots of folks with guns, and now in my capacity as law director, my duties have shifted a bit, but still very much law enforcement centric from the standpoint of, whereas I was supervising before, I'm kind of in charge of prosecution of those types of crimes now.
Great. Well, it's always good to have a pro-police supporter here on the program. Being former law enforcement, man, I mean, they've got a tough job. We've got to support what they do. Let's get started today. We always open up with our safety question of the day. So I'm going to throw this out to you. How many Americans are gun owners in the United States?
I'll say a lot.
A lot is correct. Give him the prize. I think we're good to go. You get the washer and dryer.
Thank you.
We're looking at about 81.4 million gun owners in the United States. An estimated 7.5 million U.S. adults became new gun owners between January of 2019 and April of 2021. Wow. That's a huge increase.
Very much.
What do you think contributed to that?
Well, I mean, I think a number of things probably contributed to it, not the least of which being the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, it was, and in some...
Wait a minute, I got to wear a mask, so I'm going to go buy a gun?
Yeah, well, not so much, but I think it's just a reality that none of us have ever lived in our lifetimes. It caused a lot of, unfortunately, how you felt about the science of it, or sometimes the lack thereof, caused a lot of polarization of society. I mean,
right, because everybody had a different view of it. Some people were scared to death of it. Other people were just another step in life.
And from the law enforcement standpoint of things, as you know, having retired as a police officer, we were looking at the better part of 18 months where everything was kind of locked down, and
right.
People weren't leaving their houses. They weren't able to go about their daily lives, for that matter. And
I would answer routine calls dressed like a surgeon.
Yeah,
I would have rubber gloves and a mask. It got crazy. We didn't know what to do.
And people being inside together that long.
Right.
Conflicts
it became
can
volatile.
abound.
It became volatile. Yeah, a lot of domestic. We did receive a lot of domestics at that point. I mean, you get on people's nerves. Cabin fever, I guess.
Absolutely.
Especially in this sunspot area of Warren, Ohio.
Balmy Warren, yeah.
Right. So I think the pandemic, I agree with you. The pandemic definitely created a lot of problems for us, a lot of insecurities, the change in political leadership and the attitudes towards guns. I mean,
certainly.
Both for and against, there was just a lot of turmoil going on. And I think people were like, well, if this new administration comes in and they're going to do away with guns, so I better buy them now, was kind of the mindset maybe.
I think that's true, and I think we've seen it, in greater proliferation recently, as you've indicated, but we saw it, every election cycle, really, every national election cycle, you see some effect of that.
Sure, it's a look at me kind of moment. You're either pro-gun or anti-gun.
Exactly.
And it's a jump-off point.
Yeah.
So I get it. But I guess most importantly, I'm doing a little bit of research here. We were looking at 2020 was the best statistics I could find. 21 wasn't inclusive yet. They were looking at about 21,570 homicides in 2020. Mm-hmm. It's over 21,000 homicides, which is up almost 5,000, about 4,900 more than 2019. Mm-hmm. Okay, so more guns, more homicides. They said about 77% of the reported homicides were committed with a firearm. So roughly 16,000, 16,600 were with a firearm.
Right.
So, okay, people use guns. People are going to be mean. People are going to be nasty, and people are going to use guns because, I guess what? It's the all-powerful equalizer. Come at me with a knife, and I have a gun. I'm going to win this one most times. So, but interestingly, there was no real racial disparity. Because let's face it, our society is all about screaming about racial disparity and inequality, and there really wasn't that much. When I looked at it, they said about 9,913 were black, 7,029 were white of the people killed in 2020.
Okay.
So I mean, slightly higher
Right.
in the black community, but not really outstanding. Definite gender difference. There were over 14,000 men killed and just over 3,000 women killed with firearms.
Right.
Wow.
Staggering numbers, but, typically with any crime, not the least of which being firearms and homicides, statistically men outweigh the female count, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, men are more violent, more volatile. I think we're explosive.
Statistically, yes.
Yeah. That's just the way it is. Physics, I guess. It looked like many more people were turning to firearms as a source of personal and home protection.
Yes, indeed. And I think, you saw an increase over, particularly from 19 on, you see gun ownership skyrocketing. And, I think a lot of that stems from fear of the unknown, quite frankly. Like you mentioned, the political climate changing. We had a global pandemic. Things were just uncertain all around. And you had, very dug-in, entrenched viewpoints on every side of the political spectrum. And, of course, media doesn't
media is 24/7. You never shut it off.
Exactly. And
if you want to tick yourself off, just turn on your TV in the morning and watch the news.
Exactly.
It is... It fuels everything, and I'm not sure we're not getting the Walter Cronkite versions anymore.
No.
Unfortunately, it is tainted. So you have to do the best you can with what knowledge you have.
Absolutely.
And apply what they like to call common sense approach.
Seemingly in short supply these days.
Yes, and if you don't have it, borrow it from your neighbor, folks. Okay. But people trying to protect their homes, buying firearms, because of the pandemic, because the pandemic where were shortages, food shortages, and shortages in everything, and people were not going to work.
Yes.
There was a lot going on, so people felt the need to protect their homes, and they buy these firearms. And, I always said if somebody breaks in my house, they're not going to be leaving, only because I'm protecting what's mine. And I don't really feel that you need to be in my house uninvited. So if you come through my door, you expect not to walk out.
Yeah.
That's just, it is what it is. And along those lines, there are laws that allow for that.
Indeed.
Number one, the Castle Doctrine.
The Castle Doctrine in Ohio and other states.
So that basically says, for those listening, and I'm just going to give you layman's terms, if you're breaking into a house, you already assume that you're not permitted to be there, and somebody can use lethal force against you to protect themselves. You are the law director, so you could speak probably more on that. But it was such a good idea that at least 23 of our states have that Castle Doctrine or some version.
Yes, and it like you said, it makes sense. Someone enters your dwelling, your home. It's the name of the law is taken from, a man's home is his castle kind of thing, and you have the right to defend you and yours in your castle, so to speak. So that's where the premise behind it stems. But as you mentioned, someone comes into your home uninvited, chances are that their intentions are,
they're ill
not
intent.
good.
Right, there's ill intent
Right.
there.
So, I think it's a sound law. I don't know how folks will feel one way or the other about it, but I know I like living in a state with the Castle Doctrine because, look, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I want to be able to have that freedom to protect what's mine.
Absolutely. When we built our house, consequently, all our bedrooms are upstairs. I always believed, you don't want to fight uphill.
Right.
So I always had the upper hand.
Yeah.
Of course, we do have 2 large dogs downstairs.
Right.
So that helped too.
That
so
helps,
that's just my kind of security.
Sure.
But everybody in my household is pretty well versed with a firearm. I take the mystique away from it, so there was no problem with my kids. They were trained on how to use them and why you would use them.
Sure.
So we try to keep ourselves safe in that aspect. But the Castle Doctrine, in 23 states, so you have the right to protect yourself. So these people about the firearms, they were going to be covered if somebody broke into their house and tried to do them ill will.
Right.
We come to a part where part of our program I like to call "You Don't Know What You Don't Know." We try to bring things out to people. So when you're not, incidentally, the Castle Doctrine also applied to your workplace or your vehicle.
Yes.
In certain circumstances.
In certain circumstances, yes.
So, but you don't know what you don't know. What about when you're not at home or in the workplace? What covers you? Where's your liability? Where's your coverage?
Well, ordinarily and historically, the case is that you're not permitted or entitled to use deadly force unless confronted with deadly force, and you have had a duty to retreat.
Okay, wait a minute. I got to stand back. So here's the blurry vision. I don't know what you know. You could be Joe Rogan in disguise. You could be Chuck Liddell in disguise. I don't know. You could be Conor McGregor. Your attributes, just your skill level alone, is enough to be lethal.
Right.
I don't know that.
It's true.
So am I allowed to shoot you if you come at me?
Recently, there's been a change that I don't want to go so far as to just make a blanket statement that says you're allowed to shoot me if I come at you without knowing why I'm coming at you at all. But there's something called stand your ground. Several states have enacted what are known as stand your ground laws, which basically, to put it most simply, what that does is eliminate your duty to retreat if at all possible.
So I don't have to run away.
No.
Okay.
If confronted with deadly force, you didn't have to anyway, unless you had that as an available option to you. You had a duty to retreat if you could. If you couldn't, you were permitted.
So if
under
I'm
the
not
law.
Backed against the wall,
Correct.
I had to try to get out of there and avoid the problem.
Correct.
Turn the shoulder, turn the back, turn the cheek.
Turn
right?
turn the other cheek. Right.
Right.
However, with stand your ground, many states have adopted stand your ground laws. You no longer have that duty to retreat. So the presumption is flipped basically in the eyes of the law. And what that means is where, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. In many respects, that doesn't matter because whereas before you had the duty to retreat, now you don't and are permitted to, quote, stand your ground and defend yourself because you don't know what level of threat may arise. So if faced with deadly force or less than deadly force, you are still permitted to stand your ground.
It's how you perceive it.
Yes.
Okay, so again, it's got to be in the eyes of the beholder type of thing.
Yes.
And I've got to convince people, should I ever have to use this, that I need to convince people why I was in fear for my life,
Yes.
imminent fear for my
Yes.
life. Okay, all right. Well, that brings up the old stand your ground. It is available in 36 states.
Mm-hmm.
That was my research showed. So it seems pretty commonplace. What was interesting is on January 4th of 2021, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed the Stand Your Ground bill into law, which was, I'm showing SB 175. And previously, Ohio's faced a duty to retreat when encountered with life-threatening situations.
Right.
So he did sign that in, and Ohio is a Stand Your Ground state.
Yes.
Okay. So now we're going to go. All right, we're good to go. There's more guns in the system now. More gun owners. We have protections against somebody invading our house.
No duty to retreat.
No duty to retreat. It's really getting wild. We've always had this concealed carry license, a CCH, right?
CCW.
Okay. So to qualify for that in Ohio, all you needed was you had to be 21 years of age, right? And you needed to complete a required 8-hour course to obtain your certificate of competency.
Yes.
And pay your filing fees.
Yes.
And it's a
And
background
check.
checks.
Yes.
And, okay. So we had to make sure that you weren't the bad guy trying to carry legally to go do illegal stuff.
Sure.
Okay. So in Trumbull County, I looked at it. It looked like your licensing was good for 3 years. And you didn't need to renew it.
Right.
You didn't need to take the class again.
Right.
So in essence, if Connor over here decides he's 21, he wants to get himself a firearm, he goes and gets it, and he goes down and he registers with the sheriff's department, puts in
Yes.
an application,
Yes.
pays his $60, $70, whatever, I think it's $77 first time. They do a background check, fingerprints, and the whole shebang on
Yes.
him. Then he has to find a certified instructor,
Yes.
take an 8-hour course, which is like 6 hours of classroom and only 2 hours of actual mandated handle the firearm and shoot at paper.
Exactly.
Okay. And then he is now a skilled operator of that weaponry and can carry that basically anywhere he wants to go unless prohibited by signage or law.
Correct.
So that would mean Connor couldn't go to the post office with it, the police department, the courts,
Correct.
churches. I guess places where you probably shouldn't have a gun, right?
Right.
Okay. That's all great. And all he had to do was pay a $50 renewal fee when it's time to come and get it. When it expires, he has to pay $50 and he gets a new one.
And doesn't need to requalify.
Doesn't ever need to show proficiency for that firearm again.
That's true.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
I guess just because being law enforcement, we qualified twice a year with
Sure.
various weapons.
Yep.
If I was to carry off duty, I had to qualify with each weapon
Yes.
I was to carry off duty. I guess I'm kind of blown away by the minimal amount of training you need.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a good idea. I'm just going to throw it out there. What I thought would have always been great is, hey, after 5 years or 3 years,
You have to requalify.
requalify.
Yeah.
Every 3 years. Yeah. What the heck? Show me you're proficient. Enough said. I think you're getting my drift on this. I wasn't. While it was something, I don't think it was enough.
I agree. I mean, it was something, which is better than nothing. But, when you have competing viewpoints, for lack of a better description, I mean, if you recall, we're both old enough to remember when the concealed carry law in Ohio allowed for concealed carry and what that looked like and what that fight was on both sides. I mean, law enforcement was very adamant and very vocal about this is probably not a good idea.
I will say, as a police officer, I was never in favor of concealed carry
Right.
For private citizens. I thought open carry, I was fine with that. If I know you have a firearm, I already know what to look for.
Sure.
On the flip side, I will say this. I was always trained, even through the academy, there's a gun at every call you go to.
Sure.
Because you're bringing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
As
just
a police
assume.
officer.
Yeah.
So you must always assume somebody is armed.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a give and take on that.
But the flip side on it was, how does it constitute by prohibiting them historically, prohibiting the ability to carry concealed? How does that impinge or infringe on your constitutionally protected right to bear and keep arms? And the push-pull of that went on for years and continues to go on both in Ohio and nationally.
Oh, yeah.
So, and sometimes you get a good result and sometimes you get a not so good result.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, in addition to that, the CCW licensing, which I just found this out, there was a provision in there for a temporary emergency license.
Yes.
Okay, folks, listen here. They wanted you to qualify, go to training, show you can use the gun and everything, but they put a provision in there that you didn't need to do that. If you were in imminent danger, if you were a victim of a crime or something, and felt that you were in imminent danger, all you needed to do was swear an affidavit, pay a $15 filing fee, and the cost of a background check and everything, and your fingerprints, and you'd get a CCW license.
Yes.
Okay. The last person I want
As
to
someone
have a
facing-
firearm is somebody
someone
that's in a
facing
traumatic
tempor-
situation,
someone
right?
facing a temporary emergency.
I realized you needed to defend yourself, but at the same time, you're probably not in an emotional state or mental capacity to be utilizing it well.
Sure.
Anyways, that blew my mind. I
Yeah.
never knew there was a temporary emergency license, but I guess it is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
We have to read the whole law, not just some of it.
there was much of it. Yeah, there was quite a bit. So, okay, at least people have to be screened for their criminal history.
Yes.
And pay some out-of-pocket expenses before they can carry a concealed weapon through our licensing process.
Yes.
And there were consequences if you didn't follow the rules.
Sure.
I mean, you could lose that permit, and then you weren't allowed to carry.
Absolutely.
Unless openly, if you want to go federal.
Right.
And constitutionally. Okay, so everything's well and good. Not so fast. Folks, welcome to Thunderdome. Okay, things are about to change in the state of Ohio. Senate Bill 215, the constitutional carry type bill. As of mid-June, I'm going to say 12th or 13th, Ohioans may carry a concealed handgun, wait for it, without a license. Okay, I said that
training.
right. Yeah. You can carry, as of June 13th, is what I'm showing, in 2022, you can carry a concealed weapon without a license, without training, anywhere you want to go that isn't prohibited by law, again, pretty much by signage saying you're not allowed to have a firearm there, or government agencies, et cetera, et cetera. And let's just not stop there. So can people from outside Ohio. If they come into Ohio from Pennsylvania, they too can carry concealed.
Thunderdome indeed.
Yeah, so it's going to get a little crazier. You're going to see a lot more guns out there. There's more gun ownership. Everybody's going to want to put one on their hip. And again, maybe you need to take the mindset that I took from 1985. There's a gun at every place you go. And if you're not bringing it, somebody else is. But the CHL, the concealed carry license, is still an option
Yes.
after June 13th.
Yes.
So our government, we're going to continue to sell these things. Okay. So the law goes into effect. You don't need to have a license to carry. But we're going to keep carrying, providing you a license
If you want
if
one.
you want one. Just come on down, shell out your $60, $70, shell out some more money to an instructor, go through the training, get your ammunition, and you get your gun, and go out there and plug some holes in some paper and get that license. And don't forget, renew it for another $50 after 3 years.
Yeah. Pretty.
Okay. I don't know why you would bother.
Right,
Honestly, why bother?
Like the old saying goes, I'm with the government, I'm here to help. In this case,
Beware.
not so much.
Beware. Okay, so we've got this new law. I got to ask you, how is this new law keeping people safe?
I don't know that it is keeping people safe. I mean, that's one, you being former law enforcement, me currently involved in law enforcement as a municipal prosecutor and city law director. I mean, I can see it from both sides. Truly, I can. But
Okay, how's it make me safer? Let me.
well,
I'm going to look.
best case scenario, how
Best
it makes you
case,
safer.
yes.
If everyone can carry one and needs no training or certification or licensure to do so, as you said, assume every encounter you're dealing with someone has one, I'd feel safer. I know personally, knowing that I had one. If I am to assume that anyone I'm dealing with is potentially carrying a concealed weapon without training, licensure, etc.
Okay, so somebody with no training, other than hey, that gun looks nice. Mm-hmm. That's a 50 caliber Desert Eagle. Looks sharp. It's big. It's shiny. I like it. Puts it on their hip, and they're at the same place you're at, and all of a sudden they're not coping well, and they get angered and pop some rounds out. Mm-hmm. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe knowing that the decline in mental health in our society is such that people are still going to be able to carry firearms, because even with your concealed carry, they basically just ask you a question.
Right.
When you go to buy a gun, do you have a history of mental illness? And you check yes
a
or
box.
no.
Yes.
There's nobody screening you for mental illness.
No, and it's kind of funny that not funny. It's, I guess you can say it's tragic that you mentioned that, because you have a spike in mental health illness in our society.
Look at the pandemic.
Exactly.
Look at the illegal use of drugs. Look at just everything. Inflation. I mean, our world's gone crazy. We've been turned upside down.
Absolutely. And that spike in mental health issues, statewide, nationwide, is running parallel with an increase in gun ownership and firearm ownership and possession. I don't know that is...
And a decrease in training, mandated training.
And licensure.
How about that?
Examination of someone's mental well-being or fitness to possess a firearm. I don't know that those two things should be running in the same direction upward at the same time.
No, I don't think this law is going to keep us safer.
I don't think
really
so either. And to punctuate that thought is just about every law enforcement agency in the state lobbied against the passage of this.
Oh, the Ohio FOP was
Yes.
against it. Yeah, I mean, obviously,
Sheriff's Association was against it. I mean,
nobody liked this idea. You know, our police officers are under attack right now, anyways.
Absolutely.
Our society's just gone crazy.
Yes.
And you know, when you're attacking your protectors, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's a societal problem.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if it's generational, but it seems to be more of the norm than the oddity. You turn on the TV and there's another couple police officers
Yes.
shot. Unbelievable. The first probably 10, 15 years of my career, I didn't even wear a bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
That's
Now they're
amazing.
mandated.
Now they're mandated, along with body cameras and less lethal gear, and it's just, yeah, it's gone to a point where we need to fix it. But these kind of laws, I think, are contradictory to officer safety and to public safety.
I agree.
The new law also, if I read it right, says if I want to go down to my local watering hole, my local bar, I can carry that firearm in there with me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
It's correct. It's not a good idea. I mean, because nothing mixes more poorly than alcohol and firearms.
Well, but but as I read it, as long as you're not drinking.
Yeah, and that was the case with the CCW too. As long as there wasn't a prohibition by the tavern owner or bar owner or whatever that you couldn't carry within, that's where the line was drawn. Yeah, you can carry inside a liquor serving establishment or an alcohol serving establishment, but you just couldn't be drinking.
I don't think you could throw a rock in a bar parking lot and find somebody that's not drinking.
Exactly. So while well-intentioned when it was written, I suspect, I don't know it achieved its practical intended effect.
Yeah,
and this certainly doesn't either.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of sketchy stuff in there.
You said Thunderdome.
Thunderdome, I said. One man answers. All right. So, I mean, there are prohibited places. We talked about that. Schools, government offices, airports,
Sure.
et cetera. Yeah, definitely you want to stay away from the airports if you have a firearm. Not a good idea.
Right.
We've just gone pretty full gamut. I mean, right around the table here on this. We've picked the law apart. We've kind of looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense on its face. It doesn't seem to make us any safer. I mean, we've talked, why is it not going to make us any safer? Well, there are some factors involved. Mental health is declining, like we said. The pandemic's got people, acting different than they normally would.
We've never lived through anything like this.
No, this is the bubonic plague of the
Exactly.
20s,
So,
2000s.
and everything, not just the physical illness of COVID itself, but all of the ancillary effects of having a global pandemic are what we're experiencing.
Right. Yeah. And you've got inflation. You've got increased drug use. The one I like to look at, road rage.
Oh, yeah.
This is something. Think about it now. More people carrying firearms, and you can't drive down the road without somebody honking their horn and flipping you the bird because you drove too close to them, or they thought you cut in too fast or cut them off. All right. When I was on duty, there were a number of times we'd get 911 transfer calls that somebody showed a firearm due to a road rage incident. Then we'd traffic stop the vehicle and have to get this occupant out of the vehicle,
Sure.
cuff them up, secure the firearm. And if there's no coping mechanism for rage and anger, do we really want to put more guns in untrained hands and on the roads? I did just quick little, Google, type in road rage, January 10th in Stark County, a 32-year-old was shot several times by a 26-year-old at 7:25 p.m. So not even late night. It's not a bar hour.
Right.
Over road rage. March 29th, more recent, at 9:25 in the morning in Columbus, a car was shot several times with a 4-year-old inside because somebody made an improper left turn in front of them. Are we really going to flood the streets with these guns with no training?
Seems that way, right or wrong, and I'd say wrong, but I mean, it's just
at least the CCW license provided a minimal amount of training,
right,
and some consequences,
right.
I mean, you had something to lose.
Well, one of the things that under the soon-to-be former CCW law was, if law enforcement pulled you over, you had a duty to notify law enforcement
absolutely
immediately,
or you could lose that license to carry.
That's no
hands
longer
on the steering wheel, 10 and
2, exactly. That's no longer going to be the case under 215, the constitutional carry law. You have
right.
no duty to notify law enforcement
now
on a stop.
So now our police officers are being trained that right upon a stop, the first thing they do is ask if you have a firearm
absolutely.
on you, which I mean, I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
But I mean, again, you're putting it on the police, not the citizen.
Exactly.
That's carrying it.
More additional burdens on law enforcement, unfairly placed.
Right, yeah. There's a difference between regulation and no regulation. And I think we're seeing, deregulation of these firearm laws. It's just ridiculous. And I'm not sure how it makes any of us any safer. I know we could talk about this all day, but you're a busy man. I know you've got places to be. So just a quick little Safety 365 recap. Just reflecting back on lessons learned in today's episode. We looked at 77% of reported homicides in 2020 were committed with a firearm, and that was roughly over 16,000 people. The Castle Doctrine, which provides you some immunity, says that you have no duty to retreat from a situation in your home, workplace, or vehicle, if applicable, before using force. And that's available in 23 states currently. We talked about the Stand Your Ground, which is also in effect in 36 states, and you have no duty to retreat from any situation before using deadly force, and it's not limited to one's home, place of work, or vehicle. When I say no duty to retreat from any situation, obviously any situation would cause you imminent physical harm. And lastly, we talked about the Senate Bill 215 that will go into effect as we have it here, June 13th, that Ohioans may carry concealed handguns without a license, and as well as people from outside Ohio that enter into Ohio, they also can carry a concealed firearm.
These are strange days.
These are strange days indeed. Enzo, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. You offered some insight. It was always good seeing you, great talking with you. Just to our listeners, special thanks to our show sponsor, Bolo Stick LLC, the door barricade device, providing safety and security to homes, schools, churches, and business locations across 42 states and into 6 countries. Visit them at www.bolostick.com. And as always, thank you to the Trumbull Career and Technical Center for making this podcast possible. For Safety 365, I'm Bill Barna, reminding you to be aware, be proactive, and stay safe.
Safety 365.